are in a position to have an impact on whether or not people live or die.
You got to stick a dynamite with a lit fuse, and it's just waiting to happen somewhere.
The list of dangers and possibilities is almost endless.
There is no greater tragedy that can come from such a minor violation.
The role of the commercial vehicle plays a vital role in all of our lives. Commercial vehicles provide us with vital necessities every day. Each of us depend on truck drivers, freight companies, and shippers to keep our country's commerce moving. Take away the trucking industry for just one day, and we'd find ourselves in a pretty tough spot. But with the goods and conveniences that the commercial vehicle industry brings come certain risks brought about by the enormous volume of trucks, the size of the vehicles, and the dangerous cargoes they sometimes carry. What safeguards exist to ensure that commercial vehicles operate safely, and who's responsible to oversee their safe operation? These are some of the problems we would like to examine. We'd like you to meet the people who work with these vehicles every day and to see their efforts at keeping America's highways safe for everyone. There are three basic elements around which the commercial vehicle industry revolves: the driver, the equipment, and the cargo, which is at times a hazardous material. The driver, of course, is the major factor in this whole equation.
The driver is really the cog that makes this wheel work. He's the one who has to inspect his vehicle like he should. He's the one who has to say, I'm driving too long. The driver's the guy who has to say, this vehicle's unsafe. And he's the one who has to say to the company, to the operator, the owner, let's get this fixed, because the bottom line, it's my life driving that vehicle for you. It's your company, and I want to go home to see my family.
The driver is responsible for seeing that the load is properly secured. The driver is responsible for checking his or her truck to be sure that everything is working properly. The driver obviously is also acting as any other driver as far as obeying the laws of the road. So you have three particular aspects where the driver is very, very important in the commercial trucking area.
This is a demanding profession. Commercial truck drivers are under tremendous pressure to perform their jobs quickly and safely.
Some of these drivers work 16-hour days, 6-7 days a week, and you just wonder how they can keep a family life as well as driving safely out on the road.
After 14, 15 hours, and we often find drivers that have been out on the roadway for that long, but after 14 or 15 hours, the driver's in no condition to be operating the vehicle. He's in, especially a commercial truck, much less an automobile.
One of the growing concerns among those in the enforcement community and the trucking industry is drugs and alcohol in the cab. The physical and emotional pressures that drivers often face cause some to turn to artificial aids. A load of hazardous materials, an 80,000-pound piece of metal, and a driver under the influence. That's a deadly combination.
Well, it's one thing to have a safe trailer going down the highway with properly blocked and braced, properly placarded, proper shipping papers on board and everything like that. Then it's another thing to have a tractor pulling it with, number one, someone that may be intoxicated, may be on drugs, may have been driving too many hours in a given day without a rest, maybe driving hazardly, speeding down the highway, and there's where the problem arises.
One part of the solution to assuring quality drivers in the cab is the new commercial driver's license. Having several licenses issued by various states used to be a common practice. Drivers spread violations across several licenses. When a driver was suspended in one state, he would drive on another state's license. A national tracking system now assures violations and suspensions will show up on a license issued by the driver's home state. To obtain a CDL, drivers must pass tests that prove his driving skills and knowledge of hazardous materials. There's a growing trend in the trucking world that sees the driver as a true professional. The next factor in the safety equation is the equipment.
Defective equipment is probably the second biggest cause of accidents with commercial motor vehicles.
Lieutenant Gary Burns of the Massachusetts State Police explains that commercial trucks are sophisticated machines, but when small pieces of equipment fail, the results can be disastrous, especially when the truck is carrying a hazardous material.
The driver backed over a fire hydrant and tore off his piping underneath the tanker. The internal valve activated and shut off. but it continued to leak, lost somewhere just under 1,000 gallons of gasoline, which went into the sewer system in the city and caught fire when the furnace activated and the fumes in the cellar caused the explosion. Took apart the tank truck, and when the valve was taken off to find why it continued to leak after the internal valve activated, this nylon gasket, which goes on the spring load, was in the neck of the valve. Without the nylon gasket, product flowed by the emergency valve, and that's how we had the release.
Even the smallest elements are critical in this safety equation. A small nylon O-ring fails, and a normally quiet neighborhood becomes a disaster zone. It's incidents like this that make closely examining a truck's equipment and cargo a top priority with the people in the commercial vehicle safety enforcement. Improperly secured cargo or poor blocking and bracing creates another immediate hazard to other people sharing the road.
Find a lot of hazardous materials being carried in 55-gallon drums that's not properly secured on the bed of the truck. These drums may just be laying loose, just stacked there, you know. And the famous quote we get in this industry is, "The weight is holding it on." And we have numerous slides that show that weight doesn't hold anything on. The heavier it is, the harder it falls.
The driver, the equipment the driver operates, and the cargo being moved, these elements have to work together to make safe transportation happen. But who is responsible for making sure these elements are safe and in compliance with regulations? The Federal Highway Administration Office of Motor Carriers and the states work together in a federal-state partnership called the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. Each state designates a lead agency. Usually it's the state law enforcement, transportation, or public utility agency with the authority to adopt and enforce the regulations that apply to commercial vehicles. State and federal officials also perform safety audits at the carrier's place of business. But the cornerstone of monitoring and addressing safety on the highway is the roadside inspection.
But I believe wholeheartedly that the program is being effective, and I think when you go into a city like the city of New Orleans, if you realize what it was several years ago before any enforcement work on commercial vehicles basically was done, you can really tell a difference. Also, if you look at the hazardous materials carriers, the condition of the vehicles has improved dramatically over the past 7, 8, 9 years since we've been enforcing, in essence, the motor carrier safety regulations as they relate to hazardous materials carriers.
We've been doing this program in St. Louis since 1984, and I can tell you from first-hand experience incidents of inconvenience to the motoring public, accidents, loads falling off vehicles has fallen off drastically in the last 6, 7 years we've been doing this program.
Over the past several years, we've noticed a decline in commercial motor vehicle accidents in Massachusetts to the tune of almost 17% decline in the last 3 years. And we attributed that to the State Police and Registry of Motor Vehicles truck teams doing the motor carrier inspection and hazardous material enforcement.
All across this country and Canada, roadside inspectors examine trucks, drivers, and cargo according to standard inspection criteria developed by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, CVSA, is comprised of U.S., Canadian, and Mexican state and provincial motor carrier safety enforcement personnel. Members of the motor carrier industry are associate members of CVSA and also participate in the development of procedures and activities such as vehicle inspections.
We check the brakes for adjustment. We start at the power unit, check the steering axle brakes, and then we go counterclockwise around and check the brakes and the tires, suspension. We find a lot of cracked springs, or actually the springs missing. We look for spare tires not being secured, load not being secured, bad tires, brake lights, turn signals. And then in this case, a lot of times we find where they're running 2 logbooks. They have so many miles to get to where they're going, and and not enough time to get there without violating the driving rules.
Commercial vehicle inspectors take a great deal of pride in their jobs, even though at times it can be difficult.
This is a dirty job, and I don't think a lot of times people not in this enforcement realize how thorough you are and how dirty you can get doing this. That you're actually scraping off springs underneath the truck, or scraping off a brake push rod to be able to put a chalk mark on there to check the push rod travel. And so this is not just like writing somebody a stop sign ticket and letting them go. This is hard work. And our evidence, after having conducted some 10,000 plus inspections in St. Louis, is we had better do this because we have made an impact on traffic safety. We have reduced accidents. We have helped save lives. And we had better do this because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Some pretty important people play a vital role in making our nation's highways safe. Yet at times, the regulations they enforce are complex, and some believe too detailed or nitpicky. The safety regulations deal with the factors relating to the driver and the equipment. Hazardous materials come into the equation when the cargo is a dangerous one. There are thousands of chemicals and substances that are regulated. Overall, hazardous materials regulations are complicated, but what is more important than the details of those regulations is what they are designed to do.
It requires an attention to detail to make safe transportation happen. It's not by accident. It requires planning, it requires training, it requires detail. And if there's not that detail, then it can lend itself to myriads of interpretations. The more detail it is, the less interpretation there is, and then hopefully less degree for error.
The regulations have gone a long ways to helping us identify the presence of hazardous materials and what kind of materials might happen to be aboard a cargo vehicle. When those regulations are not enforced, what we have is we have vehicles going through communities that have materials on them extremely dangerous. And when they're involved in an accident, all of a sudden the responders are thrown into the lion's den, and they don't understand that's happening to them until too late. This kind of situation happens too often.
The hazardous materials regulations provide very detailed instructions on how trucks, containers, and packages need to be marked and labeled, and how shipping paper should be filled out. The placards you see on trucks aren't there for decoration.
If a truck turns over in a ditch or a truck turns over in a major metropolitan area, just like on this bridge in the background here, and the police are responding to it, the only thing that we have to determine initially what's in that vehicle is by looking at those placards. It then tells us, okay, we're dealing with a flammable liquid, we're dealing with a flammable type material, we're dealing with a poison gas, let's stay away from it, we may have some type of leaking, let's approach it in a very safe manner.
These things aren't nitpicky because sometimes when guys are missing shipping papers or missing any kind of labels on packages and stuff, you don't know what you're dealing with as an emergency responder. And even for the fire departments, they don't even know what you're dealing with. And you could be going in there at a level of protection for something else, thinking it was one thing when it's another, and your emergency responders would be seriously injured.
When the judges and the prosecutors understand what these regulations are designed to do, I think they will realize that there's probably no more immediate way to save a life in our entire judicial system than to enforce these commercial vehicle regulations, because the violation that is corrected in St. Louis is going to save a life in Oklahoma City.
At any given moment, there are hundreds of thousands of commercial vehicles on our nation's highways, yet there is a relatively small number of inspectors and enforcement personnel on the road. Obviously, the odds of a commercial vehicle actually going through the inspection process are fairly small. So how can we be sure the vehicles that are never inspected continue to operate safely? By supporting citations for safety and hazardous material violations with appropriate penalties. A strong message is sent by the judicial community to motor carriers that voluntary compliance is the best way to do business.
The fact remains that if we don't require these people to pay some attention to the courts in a meaningful way, the large number of trucks that will never be stopped will never have any reason to get their vehicles and their drivers in compliance with the regulations.
Enforcement and industry representatives have been working together to develop guidelines to assist the judicial community in assessing appropriate fines for violations of motor carrier safety and hazardous materials regulations.
The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has, for the past 2.5 years, been working on a recommended uniform sanction structure, which, if we can get it adopted in the state legislatures, will provide an even playing field in the courts, so to speak. Everyone will know what to expect, and the violations are so structured that the more serious violations will, of course, get the higher fines, and the minor violations will get the lower fines.
The judicial and enforcement communities have begun to work together to make fine structures reflect the cost of doing business.
If someone was being fined $10 in court costs, and court costs being $10, $12, up to $30, you're looking at a $40 or $50 fine. If a tire for that vehicle costs $300, you can pay off a lot of tickets before you have to buy that tire.
Sadly, a businessman who is having economic problems, if he can consider a small $75 or several $100 fine as simply a cost of doing business, we've all done a disservice.
The drivers and owners of vehicles have an enormous amount at stake, and it's very important that they understand that while the public safety is an issue, their own physical safety and their own economic well-being is very closely related to the safe operation of these large vehicles.
Missing component in this entire enforcement mechanism is a meaningful penalty at the end of the entire process. In the city of St. Louis, we have policemen that put these overalls on and go underneath these vehicles and find numerous violations on these trucks. They put them out of service. They require them to get in compliance before they can proceed on their journey. The prosecutors issue summonses to these people. The summonses come to court, and after all this work is done, to have them receive an innocuous fine and go happily on their way seems to completely undo all of the hard work that the police and the prosecutors have done before it.
The enforcement and judicial communities are depending on each other to make sure that large commercial vehicles are operating safely. Due to the technical nature of this type of enforcement, teamwork does play a critical role. The regulations are detailed, and a person who is not familiar with commercial vehicles might not recognize the full significance of some violations. Hazardous material regulations contain very specific requirements, even the specifics of filling out a shipping paper. So what happens if it's not filled out correctly?
A shipping paper violation in and of itself does not create an accident. It may create an incident in that if the people where that material is being received are not familiar with it and don't know what they're dealing with, then they may mishandle it. And if you have to take an extensive amount of time to determine and identify what a product is so that you'll know how to handle it, that waste of time can very well mean the difference between a very small, minor incident and a really large catastrophe.
Inspectors and enforcement officials see this and hundreds of other types of violations every day. The photos you're about to see are just a small sample that have been taken by inspectors. They show the condition in which some trucks are operating on our highways. This is one of the sites that truck inspectors fear most. This substance was leaking out of the trailer. Further investigation found several leaking containers of a corrosive material. Here's 6 broken wheel bolts. Brake system problems are common sights in inspection facilities. Here's a brake linkage with a missing bolt. Here is an air line that's been plugged so the emergency trailer brakes won't kick in. Here are 2 sets of broken leaf springs. This is not only dangerous for the truck and the driver, but when leaf springs break loose, they become missiles on the freeway. The terrible condition on the inside tire of this truck is obvious, but notice also the condition of the outside tire. This truck was carrying parathion, which is a flammable liquid that is also classified as a poison. That's okay. The problem is a load of popcorn is on the same truck right next to the parathion. When this truck pulled in for an inspection, it didn't take the officer very long to find a problem. Questioning the driver revealed that he had driven this way for miles and intended to get it fixed up the road a ways. Truck inspectors are seeing these things every day. How can these violations affect each of us, our families, and the other people who share America's highways? Well, as you are about to see, when left unchecked, these types of violations can have disastrous effects on the environment, property, and human lives. When the regulations are violated, the effects can be catastrophic. April 7th, 1988, one of the worst commercial vehicle accidents in history. 7 people are killed in the Caldecott Tunnel near San Francisco when a collision occurs involving a stalled automobile, a transit bus, and a loaded gasoline tanker. While the tanker is not the cause of the accident, the gasoline spill and resulting fire when the tanker overturns increases the severity of the incident. Post-accident investigations reveal a contributing factor in the overturn is an improper trailer modification that caused the axle assembly on the tanker to fail.
Had that axle not failed, the chances are that the tank trailer would have remained upright. Had the tank trailer remained upright, we probably would have wound up with an injury accident with no fire, and we wouldn't have had the subsequent deaths, and we wouldn't have had the subsequent fire damage to the tunnel and the other vehicles that were in the tunnel at the time the fire escalated. It could have been a lot worse. We know of at least 19 vehicles that were in that tunnel that managed to exit. The personal injury and property loss with respect to the trucks and cargo amounted to, I think, just under $2 million. The loss to the tunnel, I believe, was somewhere between $4 and $6 million. All the glass was vaporized, all the aluminum was vaporized, all the plastic was vaporized. It was just an absolutely incredible scene. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and really don't care to see anything like that again, to be honest with you.
May 20th, 1991, a cattle truck traveling west on a rural Idaho 2-lane highway attempts to stop and jackknifes. The trailer slides into the left-hand lane and into the path of a pickup truck. Both of the people in the pickup are killed. The driver of the cattle truck is charged with vehicular manslaughter. The post-accident investigation reveals numerous safety violations, including bad brakes and poor tires. Corporal Pat Mooney of the Idaho State Police was the investigating officer.
With the violations that were found, the tire and brake violations, had they been in good working order, I don't feel that the accident would have been as severe as it was, and feel that those definitely contributed to the accident.
February 12, 1991, residents of the Sacramento suburb of Carmichael, California, awake to a thunderous explosion followed by the glow of sheets of fire. A double tanker truck loaded with 8,000 gallons of gasoline overturns, sending a river of gasoline into the streets, sewers, and drainage ditches. The gas ignites and sets off a blast that led to the destruction of several homes and a mass evacuation. Amazingly, only 3 people are injured, and there were no fatalities. Property damage was close to $2 million. The cause of the accident is still under investigation. However, witnesses say the tanker truck took a corner at around 50 miles per hour. The posted speed limit, 35 miles per hour. But perhaps the greatest tragedy is the loss of a priceless human life. Recently, Tom Magnan of the St. Louis Police Department received a letter from a woman named Patty Pilla. It concerned her daughter, Angela.
Angela was 5 years old and was killed when a leaf spring flew through the windshield of our car and hit her in the head. We really don't care how much money or time it would take to do proper inspections. No one in this world can put a value on our little girl's life. If people cared, our baby would still be here today. You see, money just can't be as important as everything we've lost.
It's been nearly a year since the accident, but Ben and Patty Pilla are still living the nightmare that a seemingly insignificant violation has caused.
Me and my daughter were on our way to a surprise birthday party. She was sitting right next to me in a small Ford Escort, and we were both in the front seats and I was driving. We were traveling about 52 miles an hour when a 18-wheeler had passed us on our left-hand side. As soon as the truck had gotten in front of me, about 100 feet in front of me, I'd say, I saw something come flying off and was spinning toward us like a lawnmower blade or something. Before I could even begin to turn the steering wheel, it had already hit the windshield post on the right-hand side, had come through the windshield of the car, struck my daughter Angela in the right upper temple area as she was sitting next to me.
You know, it's kind of like this may be a rare incident. And I know they expect so many tragedies on the highway, but we didn't expect it. And this is something that's changed our lives forever. You know, Angela will never be a statistic to us.
Seeing these incidents and the disastrous effects they can have should give you a better understanding of the motor carrier safety and hazardous materials regulations. Simple violations can lead to catastrophic accidents, accidents that involve much more than just statistics. They involve people. It's critical that we all do our part so that these incidents don't reoccur. The joint partnership between the judicial and enforcement communities is at the very essence of public safety. The safety equation is all of us working together to keep our nation's highways safe.